At 43, I was rebuilding my life with a man 60 male I loved. But one night, my best friend's husband and my boyfriend's doubts tore everything apart of my life. Over the weekend, my boyfriend Sam and I invited my best friend Amy and her husband Luke over to our place to hang out. I'd been looking forward to it all week. Amy and I had been best friends for years, practically inseparable, and I wanted her to feel comfortable around Sam. Sam had only met Amy once before, and this was the first time he was meeting Luke. Honestly, I just wanted all the important people in my life to get along, to laugh together, to feel easy around one another. The evening started just the way I hoped it would. We were drinking, laughing, telling stories. The mood felt light and friendly. I remember sitting there at one point, feeling content, and thinking how nice it was to have people I cared about in the same room together. Somewhere in the middle of the night, I asked Luke a question that I thought was harmless, even sweet. I knew from previous conversations that Luke had been against marriage for a long time. He was one of those people who always said he didn't believe in the institution, didn't see the point. So, casually and with a smile, I asked, "What changed your mind about marriage? What made you want to marry Amy?" I thought he'd say something heartfelt. I thought he might talk about how Amy had changed his mind, how their connection had deepened, how love made him see things differently. That was what I expected. That was what I hoped for. Instead, he laughed and smirked and said bluntly, "She put out more." My heart dropped. I blinked, thinking surely I'd misheard him. But before I could say anything, he kept going. He said more things in that same crude, disrespectful tone, like Amy's worth, like their marriage, boiled down to how much sex she was willing to give him. I was stunned, completely frozen. I glanced at Amy. She wasn't smiling anymore. Her jaw was tight, her expression blank, like she was trying not to react but couldn't completely hide the hurt. I knew her well enough to recognize that. She was upset, and I was furious on her behalf. I was furious for her, for myself, for every woman who's ever had something that demeaning said about her under the guise of a joke. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Luke turned to Sam and casually said something along the lines of, "We should swap them." I'll be honest, in that moment, it barely registered. My head was still spinning from the other comments. My chest felt tight and heavy. I felt small and uncomfortable sitting there, and I just wanted the night to end. Thankfully, not long after, they left. As soon as the door closed behind them, Sam and I sat down and talked. He was clearly bothered too. That's when he brought up the swapping comment and said something about how maybe Luke and Amy were swingers. My stomach flipped. Years ago, Amy had confided in me that they'd experimented with swinging once or twice, but she'd always described it like something from the past, not something ongoing. Even so, that didn't excuse Luke's behavior. Sam and I agreed immediately. Luke was no longer welcome in our home. That line had been crossed. The next morning, I woke up feeling drained and raw. My thoughts kept spiraling back to everything that had happened. The words, the looks, the way it made me feel. I tried to push it down by doing normal things. I cleaned the apartment, gathered the laundry, and took it to the laundromat. All the while, I was also rehearsing in my head how I was going to talk to Amy. I needed to tell her what Luke said was not okay. I needed to let her know, carefully and kindly, that Luke couldn't come over anymore. It weighed heavy on my chest. I didn't want to hurt her, but I couldn't ignore it either. While I was sitting at the laundromat folding clothes, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Sam. "What are you wearing?" I froze, confused. What? That wasn't something Sam and I normally texted, especially not in the middle of the day when I was doing errands. I stared at the screen before replying. "Clothes, why?" He replied quickly. "Just messing with you. You could have indulged me." That's when it hit me, a cold, sinking feeling in my stomach. Was he making a joke? Was he referencing what Luke had said the night before? My mind went there instantly, and I felt a wave of anger and sadness wash over me. I didn't like where my thoughts were going. I tried to call Amy. She didn't answer. I texted her asking what she was up to, no response. My chest tightened even more. As soon as I finished the laundry, I drove straight to Sam's place. I couldn't carry all of this alone anymore. When I got there, I broke down in tears. I poured everything out. I told him how hurt I was, how confused and overwhelmed I felt, how I didn't know how to face Amy or what to do next. And the first thing Sam asked me was, "Are you making this up to cause drama?" I felt like I'd been slapped. His explanation came quickly, that his ex-wife used to stir up drama and make up stories, and he just wanted to be sure, but it still stung deeply. I showed him my phone. I read him the messages. I offered to let him look through everything so he'd know I was telling the truth. Eventually, we talked more calmly. But something nagged at me. Over and over in our conversation, Sam kept focusing on how all of it affected him. How he felt embarrassed, how it made him uncomfortable, how he didn't like being dragged into something awkward. Not once did he ask how it made me feel. Not once did he acknowledge how shaken, disrespected, and hurt I was. I sat there thinking, why am I always the one making space for other people's feelings? Why won't anyone make space for mine? I told Sam that I needed to talk to Amy and tell her everything, clearly, honestly, and soon. He suggested maybe I wait a few days because her birthday was coming up. I nodded, but didn't commit to that. It didn't feel right to sit on something this heavy just to spare her birthday mood. Later that night, while Sam and I were still deep in conversation, my phone rang. It was Amy. My heart lurched when I saw her name, but I didn't answer. I couldn't. I wasn't ready yet. My thoughts were still tangled. My heart still raw. I needed more time before I could face her, before I could say everything I needed to say without crumbling or second-guessing myself. So here I am now, sitting with all of this, feeling hurt, angry, confused, and alone. Wondering how I ended up in a situation where people I trusted made me feel so small and disrespected, and why the people who say they care about me can't seem to see how deeply it cut. I don't know what's going to happen next with Amy, but I know I can't keep swallowing how I feel just to keep the peace. When I left Sam's place that evening, I genuinely thought things between us were okay. We had talked, hashed through most of what had happened the night before, and even though there was still a heaviness in the air, I told myself it was just something we'd move past with time and patience. I felt drained, but somewhat reassured. On the drive home, I decided to call Amy back. I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to clear the air with her too, to talk about everything, to make sure we were still solid, to maybe even get some closure. As soon as she answered, and I gently brought up what had happened the night before, she broke down sobbing. I could hear the tears in her voice instantly. She told me that after they got home, she and Luke had gotten into a huge argument about the exact same things that had upset me. She said she was exhausted, overwhelmed, and just broken down by everything going on in her life. Then it all came spilling out of her. She told me about how stressed she'd been feeling, about her health issues, about the weight of her marriage. She mentioned how she's currently wearing a heart monitor because of her high blood pressure. I already knew she'd had a mild heart attack before, but hearing it again, the fear in her voice, made my stomach twist. I knew right then that I couldn't pile more onto her in that moment. I couldn't bring up the other part of what had happened, the inappropriate text Sam had sent me earlier that day, the uncomfortable question. She was already on the edge, and I just wanted her to calm down and breathe. The next day, during my lunch break, I called Sam to check in and see how his day was going. I just wanted a normal, light conversation after all the heaviness. He answered, but he was mowing the lawn while we talked. The lawnmower roared in the background, making it nearly impossible for me to hear half of what he was saying. At one point, he asked if I'd talked to Amy. I told him I had, but that I hadn't gotten a chance to talk to her about the messages because of how upset she'd been. He said something else after that, something I couldn't quite catch over the roar of the mower, and then quickly told me he couldn't talk anymore and hung up. A few minutes later, he texted, "I want a screenshot of the messages." I didn't hesitate. I sent him the screenshots of everything as he asked. I wanted to be transparent. I wanted him to know that I wasn't hiding anything. After work, I drove over to Sam's house again, thinking we'd talk things through calmly, like adults. I thought maybe he just needed to see the proof, and we could move on. I was wrong. As soon as I walked in, I could tell something was off. His jaw was tight, his posture rigid. His eyes were sharp, hard. The air felt thick with tension. Without much of a greeting, he told me flatly that I wasn't putting it all together. Before I could even ask what he meant, he exploded. His voice rose, sharp, angry, louder than I'd ever heard it before. He started shouting. He told me, over and over, that I had betrayed him, that I didn't stand up for him the way I should have, that I didn't even stand up for Amy. He said I let a pig proposition me twice, that I sat there and did nothing while Luke disrespected both of us. He accused me of being curious about it, of probably already having slept with either Luke or Amy, or maybe even both. His voice was seething as he said it, like the words tasted foul in his mouth, but he couldn't stop them from pouring out. He demanded to know why I hadn't confronted Amy about everything the very next day. His answer? Because I was hoping something might happen. Because I wanted it. Because I'd been entertaining the thought. He told me flat out that he couldn't be with a woman like me. A woman who wouldn't defend him. A woman who let a pig poop on him, as he so crudely put it. A woman who brought evil into his home. He kept yelling, pacing, his voice booming and echoing in the room. Every time I tried to speak, to tell him to calm down, to tell him I hadn't done anything wrong, to explain why I couldn't pile more stress on Amy, he cut me off with more shouting. More accusations. More horrible names. My chest got tight. My hands started to tremble. My heart was racing so fast I could barely breathe. The anxiety and fear that had been simmering under the surface for days suddenly broke through full force. My legs turned weak and wobbly beneath me. My vision blurred at the edges, like tunnel vision closing in. And then, just like that, I crumpled to the floor. I heard him scoff. His voice cut through my dizziness, cold and sharp. "You're being dramatic." I remember him saying, almost mockingly, that he could just call my daughter and she could come scrape me off the floor. I felt humiliated, powerless, completely shattered. I dug deep and forced myself to get back on my feet, slowly, shakily, and started to make my way toward the door. My one goal was to get out. I needed air, space, safety. But when I got to the door, I realized Sam had already taken my car keys. He told me I wasn't driving like that, not because he was concerned for me, but because he didn't want a liability issue. I sat down, tried to breathe slowly, and waited. It took about half an hour before I felt steady enough to ask for my keys again. Eventually, begrudgingly, he handed them over. I didn't say much else. I couldn't. My throat was tight, my heart was heavy, and my entire body felt like it had been wrung out like a wet rag. I got in my car and drove away, leaving behind not just the apartment but also, it seemed, everything I thought I knew about Sam and our relationship. In one evening, it felt like the foundation had cracked wide open, and I didn't know if I'd be able or even willing to try patching it back together. I called Amy again that evening, but she still didn't answer. The phone rang and rang, her voicemail cutting in like a cold, flat wall. I sat staring at my phone for a few moments, thumb hovering uselessly over the screen. I didn't know if she was avoiding me, too overwhelmed, or just didn't realize how much I needed her to answer. Either way, the silence on the other end of the line felt like one more crack splitting through the foundation of my life. So I texted her, "Amy, Sam broke up with me. I really need to talk to you about why. Please, call me." And this time, I didn't ask gently. I didn't tiptoe. I put my foot down with her, in a way I hadn't before. Because no matter what else was going on, I deserved clarity. I needed her to face the fallout of everything that had happened between us, between all of us. Not long after that, I found myself driving back over to Sam's house. Part of me hated myself for it. I felt fragile, raw, like a skinned knee with salt rubbed into it. But despite everything, I still wanted to see him. I wanted to talk to him. I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could sit down quietly and untangle this together. Maybe I could explain better. Maybe we could lower the heat between us. Maybe there was still something worth salvaging. I also needed to get some of my things. Small as that might seem, those bits and pieces of my life that had settled into his home mattered. I didn't want to leave them behind, scattered in the wreckage. But when I walked into that house, nothing had changed. He said the same things over and over again. His words looped endlessly, the same accusations, the same hurt, the same twisted logic I'd already heard poured out of him like a broken record. There was no softening in his eyes, no crack in his voice that hinted at reconciliation. Just the same unrelenting wall of anger and suspicion. I gathered what I could, stuffing clothes into a bag, retrieving toiletries, little personal items that had quietly become part of his world. It was surreal to pack my life back up piece by piece while the man I loved stood there, dissecting everything I thought I had meant to him. When I finally left, my legs felt heavy. My heart heavier still. The following days blurred into one long stretch of text messages. Endless messages. My phone pinged at all hours, sometimes a few sharp words, sometimes long paragraphs. Sometimes accusations. Sometimes questions. Sometimes it seemed like we were almost going to talk like we used to, and then the conversation would spiral back into the same cycle again. Then, late Tuesday night, just as my heart was finally starting to resign itself to the idea that maybe he was truly done with me, a different kind of message lit up on my phone. He wanted me to come over. He wanted to talk face to face. He said he wanted to get back together. He poured his heart out into that text in a way that made my breath catch. He told me how much he loved me. How terrified he was that he had lost the love of his life to the pig, as he kept calling Luke. He told me that losing me felt like the ground had disappeared beneath him. He wanted me to come by the next day after work, so we could talk. Really talk. And despite everything, despite the bruises on my heart, I agreed. Because the truth is, I love this man. I loved him in a way that felt deep and steady and grown. Not the reckless kind of love I'd known when I was younger, but the kind that made me want to rebuild my life, brick by careful brick, right next to his. So after work, I went to his house. But it was like stepping back into the same storm. He started again, pacing, his voice rising, his face flushed with frustration and grief. His words, once again, spiraled back to that one point of fixation. How hurt he was that I had engaged with a man who had clearly been trying to have sex with me. How he couldn't wrap his mind around why I hadn't handled it differently. How, in his mind, I had already cheated. How I was still hiding something. He told me I had opened a door, just a crack, and that crack was all it took to let doubt come rushing in like floodwater. And now he no longer trusted me. His words hit harder this time. There was something final about them. Something resigned. He said again that he couldn't be with a woman like me. That he didn't need evil in his presence. That I was evil. I don't even know how many times I apologized anymore. The words spilled out of me over and over. Desperate, raw, sincere. I told him I was sorry for hurting him. I told him I never had any interest in cheating on him. I told him I had been overwhelmed, scared, unsure of how to handle something I had never faced before. That I came to him first because I trusted him. Because I loved him. Because honesty was the only thing I knew how to offer. I told him that if I was guilty of anything, it was inexperience, not infidelity. That I didn't know the exact right script for how to shut down Luke's disgusting comments and handle the fallout with Amy all at once. I told him that my heart had always been with him. That it still was. That it always had been. But nothing I said could break through the wall he had built. And now here I sit, heartbroken in a way I don't even have words for. I loved this man. We were building something together, something steady and deliberate. I didn't move in with him because I made a promise to myself after my own horrible marriage that I wouldn't live with anyone again unless I was married. He knew that. He respected that. And still, despite living in separate homes, we were slowly weaving our lives together. We both carried deep scars. His first marriage had left him battered and wary. Mine had done the same. We used to talk about that, how we both knew what real pain looked like, how we'd survived things we wouldn't wish on anyone. I thought that shared understanding would make us stronger. But now, I don't know. I don't understand how I became the villain in his story. I don't understand how I betrayed him. I don't understand how, in his mind, I cheated. I don't understand how he can so easily discard all of the love, honesty, and vulnerability I poured into him over and over again. I don't know what to do. I handled things with Amy. I made it clear that I had no desire to ever speak to Luke again. I tried to do everything right after an impossible situation fell into my lap. And still, it wasn't enough. I sit here, feeling like my chest is hollowed out, my breath thin and shaky, and I just wish someone could explain to me, what did I do to deserve this? Because right now, all I feel is heartbreak and confusion, so deep it drowns out everything else.